Hey, how are you doing tonight?
I'm good. You?
I'm doing good. So far, so good. So we have
Good.
had set up this little interview, just a little to know a little bit about yourself. So I had asked you the reason why you created your channel, and you said for fame. Are you still?
Yeah.
Is that still true? Have you changed your
Oh
mind about
well,
it?
no, not really.
Not
Um,
really.
well, what I mean is like if my primary and like sole goal were fame, then I would just be a right winger, right? Because it's a lot easier to get famous that way. But I mean, I used to
Mhm.
be a right winger, and eventually I realized that all those people were just like kind of ignorant, and nothing they said was like interesting because it wasn't. Um, well, it was pretty ignorant, like I said. So
Mhm.
it's like I didn't want to be around those people and like have them as my friends or on my side or whatever. So it's like my goal is to be as famous as you can be without being a sellout to the right, because that would be very unpleasant as I had the opportunity to experience myself.
Okay, so when you say fame, what does it mean to you? Like, what does fame mean to you specifically?
Right. I guess just like be part of a community because I mean, I guess like every person who gets really involved in internet stuff, I don't really have like IRL friends or don't interact much with people IRL because I don't know why, but like it's not something that bothers me. So I'm okay with that. But then I do want to have like a group that I feel like I belong in and like have my voice heard and feel like I'm relevant, just like any human being would want.
Oh, so like,
So yeah, like my dream basically is to like be recognized by the sort of politics community on the internet, and I guess that's started to happen now that I have a, still very, very small, but
mhm.
like noticeable channel, I would say.
Yeah, and I like that your answer because there is, I guess, different kinds of fame. So the one that I was afraid you would say is it's a kind of a conditioning, where a human conditioning where it's kind of like a relationship thing where a how can I put it? Okay, so it's like uh, a person does not. Oh man, I don't even know how to explain. Okay, so let me think for a bit. So uh, it's a non-reciprocal relationship where one person really doesn't care about the other,
You
and you
mean
feel
like the famous person doesn't care about their fans?
yes, like that's a type of conditioning of like a slave master type of relationship where one person has all the power on the relationship and the other one is just a number. Does that make sense?
Yes, but no, it's yeah, I can see why you would think that definitely, but um well, like I explained now, I guess
Mhm.
my idea of fame is more like interacting with fellow famous people, and like
Fellow
being on
famous.
the same like being on the same level as them rather than having this like hierarchical relationship with a bunch of fans. Like I don't think of it in terms of like having like a crowd of fans that worship me. I think of it in terms of being part of a community of creators. And I guess like even the people who have like either have like tiny channels or don't have channels at all, but they're like in my Discord and I talk to them, I don't see them as like part of like a crowd of fans of like nameless, faceless people. It's more like people with similar interests who are somehow involved in the same community, even if not um, as directly as people who actually have like reasonably sized YouTube channels. So, like for example, a lot of people on my Discord are also in Zex's Discord, and like we interact with him and stuff. So it feels like even though a lot of these people don't have channels, it feels like we're all part of the same thing. It doesn't feel like, there's like the celebrities and then the pleb fans.
Yeah, exactly. So it's more of like a return to society rather than still existing in a society of spectacle and consumerism.
Yeah. And the whole thing with like feeling like your voice is heard. Um, yeah, I guess that's what I mean by famous. Like you have uh some kind of like significance in the world, if that makes sense.
Oh, so well, I guess there's a difference between fame and popularity, where popularity is it's more directed to people who know you and then who you know, and fame is more of like the conditioning where people are just not really, they do not impact, they don't have an impact on your life or in your experiences, and but yours on theirs, like there is an impact, sort of the celebrity status.
Right. Yeah, yeah, I get what you mean. Yeah, perhaps popularity would be a better word to use. I mean, I guess I just said like I just have like this thing sort of this default thing to say like, oh, I want to be famous, partly because it has kind of some shock value to it, and I like shock value. But I guess if you stop to think about what I mean and explain it like I just did, then maybe fame isn't really the most accurate word.
Yeah, exactly. So who are your followers to you? What are they to you?
Um, I guess like interesting people who often have, interesting things to say because like maybe somebody doesn't have a YouTube channel, so they're not like famous or popular online or whatever, but maybe they've like read much more than me, which isn't difficult. So like a lot of stuff I get in YouTube comments, it's just like a bunch of comments from like random people who sometimes I never see again or whatever, but it's still like they usually have something to contribute.
I see. So you have very much in mind human value over, I guess, worshiping value of you.
Well, yeah, because I wouldn't even find it very appealing to have people worship me, like um if people had like this standard fan behavior towards me, I guess, where it's just like empty idol worship,
Mhm.
I wouldn't think they're very interesting people, and I wouldn't see any value in that because like it doesn't matter that you like me if you're not interesting. Like I don't want to
Mhm.
be your friend. I don't want to like you.
I see. Well, actually, that wouldn't be your fault at all. So that kind of mentality, that's been inculcated into people from the get go. So
More
that's,
mentality.
yeah, that's what the system does. The mentality where they have to be subservient to a specific ideology or the whims of a specific person. That
Oh, right.
unfortunately, yeah,
Yeah, I don't blame people, but just like the end result is that they end up being kind of, like I said, kind of boring and unappealing, but it's not their fault.
I see. So you said that you used to be a right winger. So how did you get to there, and how did you get out from there? How did you get to that and get out?
Um, right. How I got to that is in high school, people started becoming more like politically minded, I guess.
Mhm.
Um, Part of it, like a lot of it, was influenced by my school. Um, so everyone started being like a lib, and some of them, um, like I still don't know if they were just like memeing as leftists or if they really were leftists, but it was all kind of in that progressive direction between lib and leftist, and I hated that.
Why?
Um, I'm not sure. It seems like PC and like a Care Bear thing, and I want it to be the edgy person who doesn't care about the poor and doesn't care about helping society, who doesn't care about like, making everything happy and pink and with rainbows and flowers, because like that's what it seemed like to me at the time. So and also because my school was like influencing this, it also felt like a kind of establishment thing, and so I just had to like rebel against that by default because I guess that's how teenagers think, or at least that's how I thought when I was a teenager. Um, so like I wanted to break the rules, right? And it seems
Hmm.
that the rules were not the actual right-wing political establishment, but my school's liberal establishment. So in high school, I was like a Nazi troll. Like I was never really a Nazi, but I just wanted to like shock people as much as possible. So yeah.
So,
And then
mhm.
I guess I kind of that got like mellowed out into right libertarianism as I got out of high school, and I guess I just realized that there was a way to, not be like a Care Bear, sock dem, or whatever, um, but also not be like racist and sexist, which were things that I never really was. Like I've always thought that like gender roles were stupid and stuff like that. So yeah, that's how I became like a progressive right-wing libertarian.
So you mentioned shock speech. So what kind of things would you say?
Um, I don't quite remember. I think that I I don't remember. I think I would just like disagree with anything sort of progressive that anyone said. So like for instance, one time in writing class we had to write about like domestic violence against women.
Mhm.
And like I got really mad at that, and I was like, why do we have like different laws for different people? Like this is gender discrimination and shit like that. But that wasn't really a very shocking thing to do because that was actually something that I believed at the time. Well, a very shocking thing that I did that was like outside of school was one time it was Hitler's birthday and I had like a DeviantArt account. I had like 500 followers and it was Hitler's birthday, so I drew like like content warning, gore and extreme anti-Semitism, but I drew like a Nazi woman coming out of a cake made of like Jew skin with like pieces of like those striped uniforms they had with like the stars sort of sewn into the skin that made up the cake, and then there were like entrails popping out of the cake around the woman since she had like popped out of the cake. So yeah, that was pretty shocking, I would say.
Yeah, actually, that comes pretty close to the imagery that fascists would allure to so that they can reassure themselves. I could give you a read about that later. So, as far as me goes, I was never truly a right winger. So, when I went to school, it was in Mexico. So, the system that was created in 1936 was that of a socialist education, and it continued to be like that until 2002, I believe. But by then, I was in my mid-teens, so I was already, uh, you know, I had already absorbed what I had to. And so, where I had learned is that society is basically an ecosystem, and we're all dependent on it. We're all dependent on that ecosystem, and if we just go and wreck that ecosystem, if we atomize that ecosystem, then we just destroy it. And well, I know of places where that's happened, places such as Yugoslavia, and which most people don't really remember, but I do remember, like all the crimes and all the awful things that went on there. So yeah, like I always had a different perspective. So how is it?
Right.
Yeah. So how is it that you got out of being a libertarian?
Yeah, so the thing is, when I was like a progressive libertarian, when I like not very long ago, I posted on my channel a video that I found that I made in 2016 where I said like very leftist sounding stuff. I even cited like some random ANCOM person saying that like we should abolish work and turn things that like turn labor into voluntary play-like activities as opposed to like jobs. Um, so yeah, I held those types of beliefs, but I would blame it all on the individual, right? So I thought that people should just like stop being sheeple and leave their 9 to 5 jobs and go live in, the woods like hippies or something like that. And they just didn't do it because they were cowards. Um, but I guess eventually I realized that that's not how it works. And it's not like it would be very cool to have that kind of society, I guess. But it's not people's fault that we don't have it. So that's like the overarching narrative, I guess, of how I went from ANCAP to socialist. But on a more, I guess, specific level, I went from libertarian to ANCAP just because that seemed like the logical conclusion of, like negative liberties and stuff like that, and like the NAP. And then I just had like this stronger and stronger belief that the NAP was the objective morality, and you just had to do that, otherwise it was immoral. Um, but I was never really convinced by the pragmatic arguments of anarcho-capitalism, so I was always like asking things in the Facebook group like, but how is this going to work? But how are we going to make sure that, it doesn't turn into like a totalitarian nightmare? And I never really found that people had very satisfactory answers, but because I had like this dogma of the nap, I just thought like, well, I'm not too sure if that's going to work, but I guess we're just going to have to make that work because the alternative is immoral, so we can't do that. Um, but then eventually I debated destiny, and I was pretty much hoping to lose the debate because I wanted to be convinced that like there was a possibility of like being moral or whatever like outside of the nap. And he didn't really do that, but then some of the people who talked to me after that did it, and I have a video explaining why I'm not ANCAP anymore. But basically, I I'm still not sure how that happened, but I went from like hardcore nap objectivist to like moral nihilist and moral anti-realist, which I still kind of am. Um, yeah, and then the socialist thing was just because it seems like society would function better that way. And now that I don't have to worry about the nap and everything, I can just say that, yeah, that's what we should do. But I guess I still don't have like a very strong moral argument for socialism or anything because, yeah, my whole view on morality got completely shattered and destroyed. And yeah, I've actually been trying to look more into that and like talk about it with people, but I still haven't come to any conclusion. But yeah. And also, another thing as well is that I kind of have to pretend that I don't have all these problems with morality because otherwise I'm not going to live, I'm not going to make videos, I'm not going to do anything. So I guess I just assume that if people's goal is like their own well-being and well-being of society in general or like humanity in general, then socialism is the thing that would best accomplish that goal. So I just go with that without I just like assume that goal. I didn't have to go into why we have that goal, or like is that goal good, or like how to convince people who don't have that goal to have that goal. I just like take that for granted and go from there because uh, beyond that point, I have like all these philosophical problems.
Well, it's a good thing that you finally realize that you see that society is actually the ecosystem in which we live in, and we have to take care of it. Otherwise, we're just gonna like just be out on our own and not accomplish anything. Because I mean, we can't, we just cannot accomplish this enormous task by ourselves. We need society, and society needs us. That's the reciprocal relationship that exists within collectivism. So, as far as the non-aggression principle, which libertarians like to tout, which is utter nonsense. So, in the real world, that never happens. As soon as there is a vacuum of power, something will fill it in, like regardless. In the case of Syria, it was ISIS. You know, the religious power in Syria took over that. In Nazi Germany, it was the power of the military. So there's always something to replace that vacuum of power.
Wait, so what's your ideology again?
Well, it's a bit complex, but I am a collectivist, and so what I believe for the what I think and what I have seen uh, with respect of the whole libertarian thing, where the market decides and the non-aggression principle, that's just fantasy. I mean, when there is a vacuum of power, somebody or some uh, force, I would say, it would occupy that vacuum.
Yeah, but who would occupy it in your system? Because
Oh, in
most
my system.
leftists have some kind of like anarchy, at least as the end goal. And I've never really looked into the leftist perspective on that,
Oh,
but
and
yeah.
into my society occupies that vacuum. But I mean, there is no vacuum. It's society. Uh, oh my God, like, society is so vast and complex. It really needs no external power per se.
Yeah, I guess power would just be like equally distributed between everyone because the problem with ANCAP is that it leaves that power vacuum
Exactly.
it because like it
It seeks to
you know
destroy.
like it leaves a power vacuum, but it doesn't distribute power because there's still the hierarchy of like rich people and poor people. So yeah.
Exactly. So the power is just up for grabs to whomever has the audacity to take it. It'd be the military or the church or the rich people.
Yeah, I get it.
So into my ideology, I don't know what to call it. I lean towards democratic socialism, but I do understand that there is no one size fits all for the left, basically. So that's why you have your anarchists, you have the communists, and you have socialists, and each one has its own brands. Like there's Marxists, Leninists, and then on communists there's the Maoists, Stalinists. And because there is no one size fits all, then I I hold the idea that all of them have to exist in harmony. So there, we need to find a way to for the diverse ideologies of the left to cooperate with one another.
Yeah, you know Peter Coffin, I'm assuming.
What? I'm sorry.
You know Peter Coffin.
Who's that?
Oh, he's a YouTuber. That's basically what he says. He's like against sectarianism because he thinks that each sort of sect of leftist ideology might have something to contribute, and it's much more productive to just like unite and get those little bits of contribution from each person rather than like constant infighting in order to decide on like one ideology that's going to be the ideology because that's not going to get us anywhere.
Exactly. So, oh, there is this one idea that I have, uh, in which I sort of undermine them because I want them to be dependent of one another.
Hmm.
Because if they become independent, then there might be the possibility of them fighting each other. So if I can have, or if I could be let's say a government, not a government, but some sort of institution where uh, I broker the deals between the different leftist ideologies, that would be, I would say, a good thing. But the important part is that I have to keep them independent. I'm sorry, not in. I have to keep them dependent on one another.
I mean, I don't know, that seems like a very long-term thing. Like you'd only be concerned with that once we're already past capitalism. So I guess the idea is that instead of like infighting, we should just focus on the common goal that every leftist has, which is abolishing capitalism, which is, where we're at this point in history.
Right. So when we do that, what happens after?
I don't know, but I don't think anyone knows.
So to prevent conflict and the weakening of the left so that the right can return, that's what I mean by I have to keep them dependent on one another. So in essence, I am proposing a fourth ideology, which I have no name for, nor have I really put it on paper, but it needs to be an ideology that binds the three together.
Wait,
So
what, three? Sorry?
yes, the socialism, communism, and anarchism.
Oh, right.
So for, I guess, for a person or an institution to not be biased on like giving more to the anarchists or the communists or the socialists, one has to transcend the three, if that makes sense.
Um, well, it kind of doesn't because, like I said, that seems like very far removed from anything. And like most leftists I've heard talking, they say that they don't know what happens after we get rid of capitalism. So, like, I can't even say if what you're saying makes sense or not because I don't know if it's going to be like applicable to whatever society we get after that. Um, And another thing is that all these ideologies have the same end goal, but different ways of getting there. So, like, I guess after we get rid of capitalism, one of them will already have prevailed. Like, I don't know. Like I said, it just seems very esoteric to talk about this now.
So basically, what I mean is all three ideologies have the same common goal of getting rid of capitalism. Once that's achieved, what's then keeping them together?
Well, it depends what we get after we abolish capitalism, because it's not just the end goal of abolishing capitalism. If I'm not mistaken, all these ideologies have the end goal of like a stateless, classless, moneyless society. Only anarchists want to, go straight to that, and socialists or communists, which is really the same thing from the Marxist perspective, they just want like a sort of transition stage before we get there.
Exactly. So you see what I mean? So because the ideologies have a different ways to achieving the revolution, they will fight one another for control.
Yes, but before the revolution, right?
During and during the revolution.
Right. I mean, I don't really like strongly disagree. I just have no opinion. Like someone asked me on Curious Cat recently, like, how do we, what was it that they said? I think it was like, how do we fight off right wingers post-revolution to make sure that we don't go back to capitalism or to make sure that we don't get fascism? And my answer was like, choose your preferred method of answer, like tea leaves, tarot, or scrying, because that's what that kind of question sounds like to me.
Well, my take is the institution of what we could call the dictatorship of the proletariat has a price, and the price is every single right winger.
Uh, yeah, but I guess the question was like, how do you get every single right winger?
Well, there's a variety of ways, all of which available. You could suppress them, you can press them, you can repress them, straight up
Yeah,
kill them.
I guess that's what they were asking, like how do we do that? And I guess the question was, even though it was just as esoteric as this conversation we're having right now, so that's why I gave that answer. It's like they're asking me to like predict the future through like psychic
Oh, no, no, no.
methods. But I think that their question still was a bit more grounded because I think they were actually thinking like, like how do we as people in the real world and as people who like exist now, um, how do we practically fight off these other people who also exist now? Like obviously the theoretical answer is we can repress them or we can like convert them or we can like kill them or whatever.
All of it.
But that's very, again, it seems very esoteric, and I guess they wanted to know more like how do we do that? Like those are the words to describe the things, but how do we do them?
Okay, so for that, we're gonna need institutions and we're gonna need an infrastructure for that specifically.
Obviously, yeah,
So
obviously.
that's why we need all kinds of leftists just join together and then brainstorm on that.
Well, yeah. I mean, I guess that's what they wanted me to do. I guess they wanted to help me. They wanted me to help them with that kind of brainstorming. That's what I'm saying.
I
Like the
see.
answer to everything is just like we're gonna have to see what we're gonna do at the time because that time is not now.
Yeah, but you also have to plan because when the time comes and you're not prepared, the chances are you're not gonna make it. Well, I guess it's a combination of both. So you can't just plan and then stick to the plan 100% because we cannot predict the future whatsoever. We have to adapt to the circumstances.
Yeah,
So I noticed you have to me, I guess, a strange accent. Where are you from?
I don't tell anyone.
Continent wise?
Nope.
All right, fair enough. So on the idea of society, how would you rearrange society?
I don't
It, it,
know. I feel like that's what I've been saying for the past like few minutes.
so according to your views, what would be the best way to rearrange society?
I don't know. That's what I'm saying. I guess maybe this could be like explained by the difference between utopian socialism and scientific socialism, where utopian you go from like you imagine the kind of world that you want, and then you try to think how to achieve that, I guess. But you start with like imagining whatever you want, and with scientific, you like analyze the circumstances of society as it is now, and then you see what you do from there. So that's why a Marxist would say that you can't really try to predict how the revolution is going to work or what exactly, like how exactly things are going to be after that, because you can't really look at the future. You have to just look at the present and see where you go from there, but not, um, like not a very, it's not very long term, but it's like, because you could, oh, never mind. I'll just stop there.
So what do you want?
Not capitalism.
Okay, so how do we get there?
I don't know. That's what I'm saying.
No, but I'm asking you. So, like, give me some input. So, how would you like to get there?
It doesn't matter how I would like to get there. It matters like how we do. And like I don't even have any strong preference either way.
So, you'd be okay with just full on civil war or whatever?
I mean,
Like,
not really, because that would be uncomfortable, but like if
oh,
that's
very
what happens,
uncomfortable.
but if that's what happens, then that's what happens. I mean, I think that the way things are now, at least in like the US and I guess the UK a bit as well, the Overton window is very far to the right. So just bringing that back to the left to begin with would be a good place to start. So I guess like right now, I see Soc Dems as my allies, and um, I guess like reformism would be good at the point where we are, but I guess that wouldn't be enough in the long run. But then it just gets too far removed from anything.
So I'm sensing you would go more for political activism rather than
Yeah,
violence.
well, I'm not gonna go out and and
I
start a
mean,
war.
yeah, of
I'll say
course. I mean,
that much.
it's not a trick question. I mean, I come from, you could say, the fringes of empire, and I've seen what the violence does. It's not good. Like it transforms society. I mean, what you're used to seeing today will no longer be.
I mean, I
W-
guess the thing is, if you want to have a revolution, you can't just like want to have a revolution. You have to be very good at analyzing what the right time would be because otherwise you're gonna get something like the thing in Les Miserables, which was the 1832, I think, June revolution, which failed because they didn't really get the support of the populace. So yeah, you wouldn't want that to happen. You'd want to make sure that everyone's going to be on board. And I certainly know that I don't have the expertise to do that at all. So, like on my part, I'm just gonna make YouTube videos about why capitalism is bad. If other people have like actual solutions to like get a revolution or whatever, I don't know. That's up to them.
Oh, I see. Well, for those listening, so a revolution can't just be political and can't just be violence. It has to be a little bit of everything. Because if you have a strictly a political revolution, then you'll get overthrown easily. It happens to Allende. If it's purely militarily, then you have no political power. So when the time of peace comes, what are you going to do? You know, so you have to like really not society, or at least revolutionaries have to like really learn a bunch of things. You know, art, I guess, revolution through art, revolution through violence, which has happened through political discourse, through literature. So we're gonna have to diversify really well.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of what I'm saying, where you can't just like go out and start shooting people if you haven't got everybody on board first through, I guess, the stuff that you just said.
Yeah, and for those who just want to go out there and shoot people, I mean, where are you going to shoot? So when's that gonna happen? You know,
Hmm.
like it takes planning. Like, don't just do things on impulse.
Yeah, but when I say that, we can't know how it's going to be, I don't mean it should be on impulse. I just mean that
Yeah, I
you
know.
can't plan it in a way that's like divorced from what's happening now. You have to examine what's happening now and then like plan based on that.
So the planning is not going to be so much on like a step by step basis. It's more on like on a goal basis. And then if you have step by step, then you have to be flexible enough to like, okay, so this didn't work. So what else can we do?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's why I'm saying that it's not like a good question to ask. Like, how would you arrange society or whatever? Because, like you just said, it probably won't go whatever way you imagine.
The way I would do is no billionaires. That would be illegal. Capital punishment if necessary.
I mean,
Go ahead. Just So
No,
what's on
I
your
mean,
mind?
like, obviously, like, communism wouldn't even allow for billionaires to exist, like, not by legal punishment, but just like, there's no wealth accumulation, so yeah, no billionaires.
Well, it needs a set of rules so that it can happen. Like it's not just, well, it's communism, so nobody's gonna get rich. No, I mean, you need to have rules in place.
Like, yeah, but the rule isn't going to be like no billionaires. The rule is going to be like no capitalists.
Well, there's also the accumulation of wealth, not of wealth, but of resources, I guess. So how would you manage accumulation of resources?
I
You
mean,
have to,
again, you're going very far
you,
into the future where it's
you
like
require something
you
there.
can't tell how exactly it's going to be run. You can't tell how
No, I
exactly
mean, I'm not
things are
saying
going to
that.
be enforced because it's going to vary based on, where the revolution happens and like who's doing it or whatever.
No, like I'm not saying that it's bound to happen. I'm just saying, like, in case it happens.
Yeah, I don't think we can foresee that. And you're not even asking me to foresee it. You're asking me like what I like how I would do it.
Oh, so like if it happens, what would you do? Like that's kind of where I'm going to.
Don't know.
So you don't know what to do if something happens? Uh,
No. I don't know what to do if something happens. What?
no, as in like one of those hypothetical examples. So like how you would know how to react to the
Oh no,
event?
because like you said like something happens, like we don't even know what we're talking about.
Like the examples I'm giving.
Well, no, I don't know because I don't know what's going to happen and I don't know how exactly this is going to affect me. I don't know.
No, like I'm not saying like you should know what happens. I'm saying so if something
No, but that's
like
the problem though. I get it. You're not saying that I should know. You're just asking me like what I think or like what I would imagine. But
yeah, like
that's just like irrelevant to the point where I won't even like try to think about it because why would I?
uh not really. I mean, if by any chance one of those hypotheticals happens, you'd be like, oh, I remember this. It'd be kind of like a deja vu moment.
I mean, that just seems like kind of an unreasonable expectation to expect people to think of like what they would do in a bunch of random scenarios so that if one of them ever happens, they'll have like this deja vu.
Well, I mean, don't just think of a random scenario, but the most likely scenario.
Well, I don't know. In order to tell what the most likely scenario would be, I'd have to be like very, very knowledgeable about, the current circumstances of society. And, which country even are we talking about? America, the UK, my country? I don't know nearly as much about those countries as I would need to know to even begin to like foresee how a revolution or a transition to communism would work in these circumstances.
Aren't you curious about it?
Not really.
You don't want to know what happens to society? What's been happening in society?
Well, no, because that would mean I would have to like learn a lot of history, economy, politics, foreign affairs, internal affairs, sociology, all that kind of stuff. But I'm only interested in that to the extent that, that I actually like look it up and make videos about it.
Yeah, I mean, you cannot be omniscient. That's a lot of information, but at least to be able to tell, oh, so this is going on because of this.
I mean, to an extent, but not
Yeah.
to the extent that it would be required to make any authoritative judgment about a revolution.
And why wouldn't you?
Because there's just too much shit, and a lot of it I'm just not interested in. For example, I'm not interested in most like internal affairs of like actual policy politics and like party politics. I'm not interested in economics. Yeah, I'm not interested in economics. Um, yeah, foreign policy, I know nothing about either. Even history, I don't know much about and don't have like a particularly strong drive to learn.
So what are you interested in at the
Spooks.
moment? Spooks. What kind of spooks?
I mean, like, I say spooks like in a very vague way. Okay, it's not the strict stern right sense, but just like I guess if you look at my channel, the stuff that I talk about is mostly about like how everything is a social construct and how that's dumb.
How? Like, explain that to me a little bit further.
I mean, I think I have like three videos on toxic masculinity. Then I have a few about like feminism in general. I'm trying to remember what my videos are. Then I have like some videos that are just like about YouTube drama. Um, some that are like really abstract philosophical things, like the one about aliens and destiny and veganism. Yeah.
So what have you learned from feminism so far? Because that ideology is just humongous. I mean, there's academics for it already.
What have I
That
learned?
yes, that topic is huge.
hmm
So
Um, I've learned that gender roles are bad and should be done away with. Yeah. I mean,
all
I
like
just say
all
it
of them,
like that's
or do you have specific ones that you say, yeah, that one no, and that
no,
one,
all of
yeah, I
them.
guess all of
All
them.
of them. And like the only reason I won't say that gender should be done away with is that, that's basically like a tough talking point that they use to invalidate trans people. So like if people still feel like it's important to them to identify as a gender for whatever reason, then like fine. But I think that we should get rid of like all gender roles to the point where gender will be insignificant and like irrelevant to the point where I would think it would stop existing, but like I don't know because it seems like there might be a neurological basis for it, but they can't really tell if it's influenced by society or not. So like I can't say I want gender to not exist, but yeah, I would want there to be basically like no societal difference between men and women at all. Like those categories are just like whether you're like a blonde or a brunette or whatever.
Is there anything else that you have learned from feminism?
Um, well, I guess that's mostly what my videos about feminism have been about, like gender roles. I want to look into Marxist feminism now because I have no idea, what that is. I mean, I do have like a little bit of an idea, but yeah, I want to look more into it.
Have you heard of white feminism?
Oh yeah, yeah, that was actually one of like my first videos when I, like stopped being right wing. But at the time I was in this like transition between right and left. So I just basically said that um, all the criticisms I see of white feminism are like, why are white women talking about their problems? And like, why are sometimes it's not even white, sometimes it's just like, why are privileged women talking about only their problems without including like trans women or, whatever, or like poor women. Um, and so I just said that. Everyone can talk about their problems. Like, yeah, of course, poor women, trans women, black women should be included, but I didn't see why every time a privileged woman would say something, everybody would be like, but what about poor women? What about black women? What about trans women? It seemed to me, I don't know if I would still think that if I looked into it now, but at the time it seemed like pretty much the same kind of whataboutism that MRAs do, where like whenever they see somebody say something about an issue that women face, they're like, okay, but what about men? What about men who face similar issues? So it felt like whenever there was a privileged woman talking about something that she faces, or like a group of privileged women, people would just be like, okay, but what about these issues faced by other women? Like, okay, those are important too, but so are the ones that, affect even privileged women.
I got lost there. So basically, uh, you sort of described white feminism, but like I'm confused your stance on it.
Oh, because like white feminism is feminism that, or at least the stuff I found on it, because it was like the definition was like feminism that, excludes women who are not like white or Western or whatever. But then the examples of people criticizing white feminism seem to always be people getting mad that there was something that was specifically about an issue affecting privileged women. And then people were like, but why aren't they also talking about, you know, other types of women? So I thought that was like stupid because like why couldn't we talk about issues that affect privileged women as well as the other issues? Like now that I'm a leftist, I don't know if I'd have the same point of view, but that's what I thought about it at the time I made those videos.
Well, yeah, like so basically, white feminism. Oh man, like there's so many levels for it. So
But then you,
for
you
for
might also be talking about like, like Western feminists saying that, like hijabs are inherently oppressive and stuff like that.
that goes with it, but white feminism is basically a type of feminism that doesn't recognize. It's not that it doesn't recognize. Well, yeah, it doesn't recognize the existence of other issues, like, uh, for example, that there's a wage gap between men and women, but there's also a wage gap between white women and women of color, and then not talking about those wage gaps between white women and women of color. That's white feminism.
Yeah,
So,
so it would
if you
be
know what
like
I mean.
I'd find an article complaining about like how some organization or some like celebrity or whatever were talking about the wage gap between men and women, and then people would be like, "But what about the wage gap between women of color and white women?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, okay, that's we should talk about that too, but like, why are you mad that this celebrity isn't? Like why can't they just talk about what they want to talk about? You know what I mean?"
No, I'm confused.
Like, what is the problem if a celebrity is talking about the men and women wage gap? Like, they can just do that. I'm not saying that like no one should talk about the other wage gaps, but if you see someone talking about one wage gap that is a legitimate issue, I didn't like that people's reaction would be like, but why aren't you talking about these other issues as well?
Oh, I see. I see. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, well, unfortunately, I guess the so-called left, there's a lot of racism. There's a lot of white feminism just lurking in there.
Well, but the thing is,
Um,
that's not really racism because like I said, I'm just saying what I thought at the time. I haven't really stopped to think about this again,
mhm.
but I didn't see it as racism because it's like they weren't saying anything racist. They were saying something that was progressive gender-wise in the wage gap example, right? So it's like, why do people take issue with that?
Well, there's a difference between racism and bigotry.
Yeah, but
So,
they're not saying anything bigoted. Like the only
oh,
bigotry that
okay.
that could be is like erasure of the other wage gaps. But it's like, so every time someone's talking about something that's not race related, even if it's something progressive, then they're being racist by erasure just because they're talking about something else.
Well, the thing is, you would need to understand the power structures so that you can understand racism and white supremacy. Oh Lord, I
No,
got to.
I don't think that's the problem.
Uh, did you live in if you lived in the West? Oh, it depends, I guess.
No, how is a celebrity going and saying there is a wage gap between men and women, we should fix that? How is that racist?
No, no, like you're not understanding. So,
I am
I,
understanding
I,
because
I,
that was literally what happened. It would be like a celebrity would talk about some kind of sexism that would affect primarily privileged women or whatever, and then
yes,
everyone would be like, but why aren't they talking about these other things as well?
yes,
Yeah, but like they can
exactly.
talk
But
about just one thing. They don't have to talk about everything.
no, but like if I guess it's a like if a white person says it and then they do not acknowledge that there is also that wage gap, that's because of white privilege. Like, am I
Eh.
making sense to you?
No, I think on a societal level, you could say that if only white problems are being addressed, then that's because of like society level racism. But
Then yeah, that's
you
what
know,
racism is.
yeah, but you can't blame one person for only targeting the issues that they want to target.
Uh, that's white privilege right there.
Well, no, you can't expect people to target every issue.
Well, not every issue, but at least acknowledge other issues
Why though?
for justice, social justice.
I mean, that's another thing as well. It depends how you approach it because if you're like, I think that I don't remember what exactly happened, but like Emma Watson was accused of being a white feminist. I don't even remember why, but then people said that, and then she was like, "Yeah, if I want to be a feminist, I guess those other issues interest me as well." And like that's fine because she actually, like decided that she valued that. But you couldn't go to like some random person and just be like, "Why don't you care about this?" Like I don't know. But that's not even what I was gonna say. I was gonna say that like
Mhm.
if you take the approach of like, since you're interested in this wage gap, maybe you would also be interested in these wage gaps. Like you can take your activism further because
Yes.
that would be in your own interest as an activist. And like that approach of just like encouraging people to do more stuff than
So,
what they are already doing, which is good. Like you acknowledge that what they're doing
mhm.
is good, and then you encourage them to do even more good. Like I think that's fine. But if you just go to a random person and go like take this like confrontational approach of like getting mad at them for talking about what they're talking about, that doesn't make any sense.
Well, I'm not sure where you are in terms of geography, but since I'm in the United States, I've noticed that white privilege pretty often. Oh, well, anyway, so what was I going to say? Oh, yeah. So,
And by the way,
when,
real
yeah,
quick, just so people don't think I'm like like an ignorant lib or whatever, um, I liked that wage gap example because the male female wage gap is actually a legitimate issue, right?
it
Where
is. Yes.
my No, yeah, but like I'm just saying that like my view would be very different if we were talking about white feminism in the sense of like more female CEOs or like more female presidents bombing the Middle East, then yeah, that would be. It's like you don't support women just for being women if they're not acting in the interests of like women as a whole group or whatever.
Exactly. So that's called intersectionalism. That's what I was going to say. So intersectionalism is when you combine all the issues, let's say, for women. So it's not just like the wage gap is not just between men and women. It's also between women, between white women and women of color. So when you take that approach, you have achieved intersectionalism. or at least you head towards intersectionalism, because for you to be called intersectional, minorities need to recognize you as an ally. Like, you don't put that label on yourself. That's racist. I mean, not saying that you're racist, but
Okay.
that's how it
I mean,
works.
okay.
No, like it is.
I'm
Like,
not saying it isn't.
no,
I
I
know what
know. Like,
intersectionality is.
okay, I know. Just making sure. Don't think I'm calling you anything.
Yeah, I don't mind. Like, I'm not an anti-SJW anymore, okay? I'm woke now.
So let's see. What issues do you know of that people of color have that are not suffered by white people?
I mean, I don't know. Like in the US, there's like all the reasons why black people are kept in poverty. All the stuff that Destiny and Contra have listed numerous times about like police brutality, fucking lead paint, wealth inequality that's still like a residue from Jim Crow and slavery and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Well, those are not the only ones. Can you name any
I'm
more?
sure they aren't. I mean, I can't name every single issue faced by the black community, especially because that's not, something that I like study a lot. I just study things to make videos when it interests me. Like,
So, what are you gravitating towards, like for your videos in the near future? Like, what's the next video going to be about?
um, the next one is probably going to be about whiteness and like race as a social construct.
Could you elaborate a little bit on it?
Basically how whiteness is a spook and like white people doesn't really refer to people of a certain skin tone or of a certain like biological type or whatever, but it's rather just whatever group has power at the moment, since like conceptions of whiteness have changed wildly through history, at points even excluding people who are now considered white for being like fair-skinned or European or whatever, like the Irish.
Oh, so when you say spook, what does that mean? That's not an To me, a spook is like a ghost, like something scary.
Well, like I said, I'm not using it in the strict Stirner right sense, as in
Yeah.
like a concept of Max Stirner. But I guess I just use it to mean social construct.
Okay, fair enough. So, go on the video. So let's have a demo, I guess.
I mean, I haven't even scripted it yet, but that's the concept really is just like explain how whiteness is not about, like an actual biological category or even like a visual category, I guess, but it's rather more about like power dynamics and one group oppressing the other, like one group calling themselves white so they can oppress whomever else they want and who they start calling not white.
That's interesting. So, what sources are you going to be using?
Not sure.
Would you like me to give you one later?
I mean, if you want, I'll look into it.
Okay, yeah, it's just a 20-minute video. It's very educational.
Okay. Who is it by?
Let me look it up. I don't remember her name.
Cat Black has a good video on it.
Hmm. Oh, Robin D'Angelo.
Oh, I don't know who that is. But yeah, link me the video. I'll check it out.
Okay, I'll do it after the stream is over. So after that video, do you have any other plans for any other videos?
I mean, there's a list of ideas, but I don't even know it by heart.
Anything from the top of your head?
I don't know, it's just like more stuff about like deconstructing gender. Um, yeah, that's all I can remember really. But
What
there's
about
more stuff than
what
that.
about the fascists? Are you gonna let them unpunched?
Well, I don't have much to say about fascism other than what I've already said.
You gotta punch them every single time, constantly.
That's what I'm saying. Like you can't really. I mean, I know you're joking, but like
Yeah.
seriously, it would be like going to my channel and seeing that I only have videos about like this and this issue that I found interesting enough to make a video on, and being like, why aren't you talking about the fascists? But why aren't you talking about the fascists? Like this channel is bullshit. Why aren't you talking about the fascists? It's like morally reprehensible that you're not talking about the fascists. Like I can talk about what I want.
Oh, so that you just described, that describes the consumerist society is just what they want to buy, and they forget the fact that art is a form of expression, and the
Well,
left should value that. Like we should value expression. Now, there's a difference between expression and threats of violence and genocide, and stuff like that, ethnic cleansing. But yeah, like I think we should value more uh, freedom of speech. Just let people say what they have to say.
well, yeah, but that's kind of what people do with the whole white feminism thing, where it's like I don't see how it's different from, you know, MRAs see feminists tackling some kind of women's issue, and then they go, but why aren't you talking about men's issues as well? And it's like, yeah, those are important too. We should also talk about those, but this is just not the place to do it. Like our group just isn't, that's not the issue we're tackling. And it's kind of this, it seems like the same thing to me when people, like, why are you talking about this wage gap and not the others?
Yeah. Also, what I usually see is that when men's rights activists, when you talk about an issue that affects women, and then they go with, well, what about men? When you actually talk about the issues that affect men, they just turn away from it. You know,
Yeah,
like
that's
it's
that's true as well.
like, for example, rape. We can talk about how, uh, not trying to offend anybody, but how priests usually target little boys. That's a men's rights issue right there, but they don't want to hear about that because they're freaking misogynists.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's a good idea. Why don't you talk about that one?
I mean, I don't have anything to say about it. I don't even know anything about like problems in the Catholic Church or whatever.
Oh, it's not just the Catholic Church. It's a lot of different religions where the
Yeah,
young
right.
boys get
I
abused.
don't know anything about that.
I'm just saying it would be sort of interesting to know about it. I don't know about it either. I just know the surface of it, which is
Mm.
young boys usually get targeted by religious leaders, and that's it. That's all I know about it. So, anything else you'd like to add about your channel, the reason you created it, and the direction you want to take it to?
Hmm. No, I think I've said enough about why I made it, and I don't really necessarily have a direction I want to take it in. I just like, see what I'm interested at the time.
So, are there any YouTubers you look up to, like
Um,
as far as like information and I guess the popularity?
hmm Well, I guess just like the standard big leftist people like Sean ContraPoints, Three Arrows, who isn't even really a leftist, but yeah.
3 Arrows, he strikes me as an anarchist, but that's just my
No,
opinion.
I think he's a sock dan.
But we need to ask him then one day, because yeah, I have no idea. He hasn't really gone into what he believes.
Pretty sure he's
Um,
answered that before. Like, I'm pretty sure he's at least said that he's not like a communist or anarchist or any type of like far leftist. But he's clearly a progressive, so yeah, liberal or Soc Dem.
well, there's quite a difference between a liberal and a sock down. I mean, so there's a. Oh wait a minute. So social democrat. Oh yeah, never mind. Never mind. I confused. Yeah, those two. Oh man, you changed one word, you put in before the other, and it's a completely different thing. Social democracy and democratic socialism. They're completely different things. Holy shit.
Yeah.
So anybody else that you look up to?
Sorry, I was just looking at something else. I'm sorry. No, I guess those are really the people. I mean, there's other like big lefty people, but I don't really watch the philosophy tube and H bomber guy. But yeah, I guess my main people are really Sean Contra in 3 hours.
Well, as far as YouTubers, I go mostly for uh I guess people who really have something to put on the table. Like there's Chris Hedges, there's Reverend Cardinal West.
Yeah, I don't know any of those people. You could link me their channels are.
They don't have channels, they're speakers, I guess. I did link you Chris
Oh,
Hedges on Discord.
wait, so like what do they do?
So basically uh they just go in places and they speak about issues and they propose solutions.
Oh,
And
okay, interesting.
they're very good at describing the issues. Holy shit. That's why I love them so much.
Okay, cool. I'll check them out. I think we've covered everything you wanted to talk about.
Yes, we have. I'm satisfied.
Okay, cool. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, you're welcome. You have a good evening. We'll see you
You too.
later. Bye.
Bye.